Good evening, and welcome to Delta Talks, Community Conversation Series, Rochester's Powerbrokers, Women and Policy. I am Jacqueline Tyson, President of the Rochester Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. We have the privilege to talk with prominent women leaders in our community. Before we get started, I'd like to share a little history about our organization. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, founded 108 years ago at Howard University, is an organization of college-educated women committed to public service with a primary focus on the Black community. The Rochester Alumnae Chapter, chartered on October 9th, 1965, serves Greater Rochester with programs that reflect a 5-point programmatic thrust, including economic development, educational development, international awareness and involvement, physical and mental health, and political awareness and involvement. Let me introduce our Social Action Committee. Dr. Donna Harris, Upstate New York Social Action Coordinator. Dr. Charmaine Cohen and Dorset Watson, co-chairs. Lashana Boose, Tynese Edwards Esquire, Dr. Gail Harrison, Jacqueline McClaney, Carnethia Melson, Francine Scott, and Dr. Ruth Scott, members of the committee. Dr. Charmaine Cohen will be the lead moderator for this conversation. I'll turn it over to Dr. Cohen. Thank you.
Thank you, President Tyson. Hello, Rochester community. On behalf of the committee members, I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. We love to hear your feedback, so please click on the link in the chat and answer 4 short questions for us. Again, the link can be accessed in the chat throughout the conversation. Okay? As you know, the topic for today is Rochester's Powerbrokers, Women and Policy. This conversation is timely, particularly because March is Women's History Month, which is a time to celebrate and honor the contributions of women to American history, culture, and society. This evening, we will interview a panel of 5 prominent Rochester women who had government or community organizations. They will speak about priorities for improving the city and addressing racial inequalities. I am so privileged to introduce the following ladies. The Honorable Lesli Warren, the Mayor of the City of Rochester. Wave your hands so folks can see you. Interim Chief of the Rochester Police Department, Chief Cynthia Herriott-Sullivan. Wave. Dr. Janice Harbin, President and CEO of Jordan Health Center. Dr. Seanelle Hawkins, President and CEO of the Urban League of Rochester, and Superintendent of the Rochester City School District, Dr. Lesli Myers-Small. Thank you, ladies. So good evening, Rochester Powerbrokers. Thank you again for your willingness to participate in this Delta Talks community conversation. We are so very honored to have trailblazers, initiators, and dynamic leaders with us, all in one setting. This brings a whole new meaning to the word Powerbrokers. Let's get started with our first question, which is for each of you. You are an African-American female leader in a prominent position in Rochester. What unique challenges do you or have you faced in your role? Also, describe how you overcame those challenges. We're going to start with our mayor, Mayor Lesli Warren.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen, and thank you for the invitation. I want to thank President Tyson and the Rochester Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated for inviting me to join you here this evening. There are many challenges that I have, of course, faced, but I think that the one that is most challenging is the sexism, as well as racism and ageism. And all three of them combined for me. I think that for me to overcome each of them, I had to surround myself with a strong team. I also had to really work to overcome the challenges that people placed in my way. But really having the support of people in the community was the way for me to do that. Reaching out to our faith community and working with our churches, working with our senior citizens and making sure that they have the support that they need in our children, and building those relationships that I think is so very, very important, and helping people to understand that we're all in this together, that we are a community that is resilient. And by working together, we could overcome whatever challenge was put in our way. And so for me, with all three of those, I utilize them as stepping stones and not as stumbling blocks.
Okay. Wow. Sexism, racism, and ageism. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Dr. Myers Small, our superintendent, can we hear from you next?
Absolutely. And I just want to thank the Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated for inviting me. And I certainly honor the significant work and contributions that you individually and collectively make to our community. When I think about my leadership role as a superintendent, I honestly think about the poem Mother to Son, right? And life ain't been no crystal stair, and it's had cracks and bumps, and sometimes turning in corners where there ain't no light. The superintendency really is a predominantly white male environment. And when I first became superintendent in Brockport, I was the only and the first female of color to lead a district in the entire county of Monroe, and there are 21 superintendents. So you can imagine, while my colleagues were friendly and open to me, when you are a first, you have things that you certainly experience. And one of my favorite sayings is, if you're not at the table, then you're probably on the menu. So sitting at the table was huge for me. So when I think about just the challenges I face, there have been multiple superintendents in Rochester prior to me coming. People do not expect that superintendents will last long, and either superintendents have left or they've been asked to leave. But I am committed to the 25,000 plus scholars in the Rochester City School District. And our young people from pre-K all the way up to adult education deserve a leader who is going to support them and really be an advocate. So despite, again, the things that Mayor Lovely warned, the sexism, people think I'm too young for the role. They question, my gender, and, there certainly is racism that's involved. But again, when you are responsible for serving underserved children and their families, you take the hits and you move forward. And I'm honored to be in the role.
Thank you. Life ain't no crystal stair. I believe a lot of us are familiar with that particular poem. So I heard from you that commitment and being at the table despite all odds is what helps you to overcome those challenges. Okay. Chief Herriott-Sullivan, the first female chief. Would you share with us your experience?
Certainly. First of all, I want to thank my Delta sisters for inviting me here today. Also, I'm very pleased, very honored to be in a group of such dynamic women. I mean, who would have thought, any of us, that, some years ago could see us getting to this point. So you've named a few of the isms. I'm going to claim a couple of them, and there's one I want to kind of slap my own term on. It's a form of sexism, but I would call it a presumed incompetence. And what that means is that, and it's not just as a woman of color, but for across the board for women, there's this presumption that you don't have a certain level of competence and then you have to earn it or prove it. And then, but I'll see with men, it's the flip side of that. They're presumed to have a certain level of competence, and it's only when they squander it that's taken away. So I think that to be in law enforcement as both a Black person and also a woman, it's a double whammy at times. But I do think on the flip side of that is that it gives us such a unique perspective that we bring to this area that's so desperately needed. It's a unique perspective, and hopefully I'll get a chance that we can talk a little bit about what that means. And so I look forward to talking more about it.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I hope we also have time to circle back around that, because you mentioned presumed incompetence. Wow. And oh my goodness. And then you're saying that as a female, you bring a unique perspective, and that is something great and something to appreciate. So maybe we expound on that some more for us. Dr. Harbin, please share with us the challenges you faced.
Well, thank you. And again, I echo the panelists here, thanking Delta Sigma Theta for this invitation. And my sorors for over 47 years now. So wow. I am blessed to be part of this wonderful, wonderful organization. I was blessed coming here to Rochester, I think, with the legacy of Jordan Health. So I used to say, start off by introducing me as just the president of Jordan Health, because they would say, Dr. Harbin, okay, Jordan Health, everyone got excited about that. Folks underestimated me. I think a lot, probably because I am a female. I was told that I appeared to be maybe meek, and they was worried that whether or not I could even weather the storm of things that was going on. I am a baby boomer, so I was raised like many African-American children. A child should be seen and not heard. However, going to a white majority school, very quickly you understand you got to have a voice. And if there's places you need to be in, boards you need to be on, you have to put yourself in there. You have to seek it out and make sure that you get where you need to get to represent. So I think by understanding I must have a voice, and I have to use that voice, and I cannot be weak or gentle about it, and that has really allowed me to keep moving forward, where I think folks probably would have thought I would have been counted out a long time ago.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Harbin, for sharing that. What I heard from you is that one of the challenges is that folk underestimated you and they considered you meek. But the way you were able to overcome that was you knew in yourself that you had to be assertive, and you knew you had to have a voice, and then you made sure you used your voice. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, all you ladies. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Hawkins, as the first CEO of Urban League of Rochester, we like to hear about your unique challenges too.
Sure, and thank you. I echo my co-panelists, their sentiments. I appreciate this opportunity to celebrate women and Powerbrokers. But I wanted to just mention the challenge of one, being a female, the first female, like many of my panelists here, that you have to, as Chief Herriott mentioned, that you have to establish yourself quickly as being competent, that you can build a legacy, you can build on the legacy that has already been established. And then the narrative, the American narrative that women are inferior to men, and consequently our decisions are challenged, we're challenged, And for me, I had to balance that. Is this happening because I'm new or because I'm a Black woman? But either way, I had to devise a strategy that quickly demonstrated to my board, to my team, and to the community that I'm not only qualified, but I'm the best at this, whether man or woman at the league, for the league at this time. And then other ways to challenge it was just mentorship. And I have to say how important mentorship is, that I connected with women and other people that have had to deal with these challenges. And that was helpful to me, to have that relationship, to go through strategies with people that had to overcome these very same barriers.
Okay, thank you. So I heard from you is that you had to establish yourself when you first came on board and build on the foundation that was already presented. And you said also some of the challenges were that most people think women are inferior to men. I think some of the other ladies echoed that as well. And you felt that you had to just show them that you were the best candidate for the job, and that's why you were hired on. And then you also utilize mentors to support you and guide you through this. So thank you for sharing that. So thank you, ladies, for your openness. And I'm sure that someone that's listening has been inspired. I certainly have, with how you've overcome the challenges that you have faced in your position. Now we will have Ms. LaShawna Booth to lead the discussion on the impact of COVID-19. Ms. Booth?
Thank you, Sarah Cohen. So my question to all of our panelists today is in regards to COVID-19. It has impacted so many lives and has taken so many lives. It has hindered businesses, and it really has caused us to exist in a different way in this community and communities in this world. So what unique challenges have you confronted as it pertains to COVID-19 and relaxing of the CDC guidelines as it relates to COVID-19 restrictions? What changes and or adjustments have you had to make, or do you anticipate making as it pertains to the organizations in which you all are leading? Can I direct that question initially to Dr. Myers-Small, please?
Yes, Dr. Myers-Small, before you answer, just for the community who may not been able to hear the full question, because it was cutting out just
Dr. Myers, chime in.
So the question Ms. Booth is asking is in regards to COVID-19. And she wants to know from these Powerbrokers, what challenges did they face because of COVID-19 in regards to their organization? And then, recently the CDC has relaxed the COVID restrictions. And now we would like to know, after you face the challenges, what changes or adjustments you have to make now or you anticipate making?
Sure, thank you. So you can imagine on March 13th, 2020 was the last day of in-person instruction in the Rochester City School District. So literally overnight and that entire weekend, we quickly had to shift and pivot to delivering instruction with brick and mortar attendance to delivering that online or through other means. And that was a very significant shift that at that time we weren't prepared to make those shifts. We really liken this experience to building the plane while you're flying. And so our community has been so incredibly philanthropic with the donation of Chromebooks and MiFi devices and other resources to make sure that our children can learn online. So instruction has shifted online. I think the major thing for us, though, is the social emotional needs of our scholars. And that has made me so concerned, because many of our scholars come to school for safety reasons, right? That's their safe haven and their home now, because even though we have slowly reopened to about 6,000 or so students, we have multiple students that still are not in the schools. So we have been very worried about social emotional. So we've put a lot of time and attention and resources to that. Just in my last few moments, as far as the shifts in the CDC guidelines, those are recommended guidelines, but our state of New York, we're waiting to hear from Governor Cuomo and from the health department to see, does indeed going down to 3 feet, will we be able to accomplish that in our respective classrooms? So it's continually moving through and working with an ever-changing set of guidelines.
Thank you, Dr. Small-Myers. I definitely can understand the work you're still going to have to be putting in as it relates to those changes. Dr. Harbin, are you able to share with us the things that you've been able to accomplish as it pertains to changes that need to happen with the CDC restrictions, or how overall operations have changed for?
Well, definitely. First of all, I have to salute my team. It was #new normal. And we understand that this new normal will permanently be the new normal in some form. So we're in healthcare. So we have patients, and our patients need majority transportation issues to get to us. And then all of a sudden they're being told that we need to figure out another way to take care of you. So telehealth became our vehicle. And for our population of patients, having the smartphones and sometimes the internet, our patients did not have that. So 90% of our telehealth visits were telephonic visits. And telephonics were a struggle to even try to get the state and insurance to say, kind of pay us more than the $20 a visit, because people cannot come in. We had to take our chairs out of our waiting rooms, space everything out 6 feet. A significant number of our staff was sent home to work from home remotely. We still have staff working remotely. We opened up a respiratory clinic because we understand that some people had asthma, COPD. They needed testing. They should not be going to the hospital for that. The hospitals were overwhelmed. So we developed a respiratory clinic that we do testing, and now we're doing COVID vaccinations in that clinic. So we understand it's the new normal, and we continue to transition, and that will be part of the way we operate as far as telehealth, and be more innovative about how we deliver care.
Thank you, Dr. Harbin. Dr. Hawkins, are you able to share some of the changes that has happened since COVID-19 and the operations of your organization?
Sure. First of all, changes and challenges. And as we know, COVID-19 has claimed the lives of so many. I experienced my own personal tragedy, as many have as well. And then coupled with having to figure out, how do I keep myself safe, my family safe, my team safe, and make sure that the organization can sustain itself beyond the COVID crisis. That was a true challenge, figuring out how we maintain the Urban League of Rochester and still meet the community need. And one of the things that we did, of course, like everyone else, we quickly went to a virtual environment, but we also continued to support the community even more than we did. So we were working longer hours, 12 to 14 hours. And one of the things that I learned during COVID is self-care, because we were working longer, helping more, making sure everyone had what they need. And we as a team weren't taking care of ourselves. And so I learned quickly how important self-care is. And we stayed attuned to the community's need. So now as restrictions are lightening up, we haven't changed. We don't plan to change, but we are paying more attention to what our community needs, like the equitable distribution of the COVID vaccine. So I'm making sure that we leverage our power as the Urban League and using relationships to make sure that we do just that. And so we partnered with Trillium Health and WDKX to make sure that we can use our relationships to make sure that our community has access to the vaccine. So those are things that we have to do, constantly stay attuned to community needs, but also make sure our team is taking care of themselves so that we can support the community and make sure that we have a viable budget so that the Urban League can be here to continue to help the community.
Dr. Hawkins, thank you so much for that. I definitely know how important self-care is, and I think our community is now seeing how important self-care is. Mayor Warren, are you able to identify some of the changes that has happened in city government as it relates to COVID-19 and how the CDC, the relaxation of the guidelines are having you make changes to how operations for our city government?
So what hasn't changed? For government, it was just that we had this pandemic that hit and everything changed overnight. But we were still required to provide essential services. People still expected for their trash to be picked up. They still expected for a firefighter to show up or a police officer to show up. They expected for the law department to still be there. And so we had to quickly transition to, getting not only our staff taken care of, but making sure that they had the proper PPE and going out, to service our community. And so we had to order that. Partnerships were essential in, transitioning to a online and a virtual world. We also had a lot of staff that had children that were no longer going to school. And so you had to figure out, well, how do we continue to be supportive to our staff and our citizens at the same time? So I was so thankful for the partnership with the superintendent. We figured out how to feed our children and make sure that they were taking care of our children and families, where our dry recreation centers provided over 2 million meals. We opened up our dry centers for learning labs for the school district. We were able to partner with our restaurants so that our senior citizens could be able to have meals as well and get those delivered, while also helping our restaurants able to really focus on not only our tenants, but also landlords and trying to get them pay. And so without the support of the federal government providing CARES Act dollars and then the second round of funding, we were able to work with the county health department and our providers out in the community like Jordan Health Center to make sure that our residents were not only getting tested, but now we're transitioning to vaccine and making sure that we're giving them the education that they need about the vaccine, about protecting their circle. So everything changed at a moment's notice for us. And we wanted to make sure that we did it with partnership and understanding that everybody was looking to us to lead and to understand, because no one had ever been in this situation before.
Thank you, Mayor Warren. I definitely hear how you were able to maintain that strong leadership that the city needs through partnerships, because that's very important. And our last panelist, Chief Herriott-Sullivan, can you share with us some of the changes that you had to implement with our police department as it pertains to COVID-19, and some things that you may have to implement as it pertains to the CDC guidelines and the relaxation of those guidelines?
Sure. It was a little different for law enforcement. So as first responders, we really could have no change in service. So we didn't have the luxury of, having a certain amount of staff work from home, but except for, certain administrative roles. So one of our biggest challenges was staff safety, to ensure they protected themselves so that they were able to come into work and fulfill the critical role that they had. And the other is, it's a little bit challenging that when you're dealing with people, you're in the people business, you have victims, sometimes who've been traumatized, and you really want to comfort them in certain ways. And it just made it a little bit difficult. So I would share that. The other challenge I think we faced was that this is a relationship business. And as many know, we have our challenges right now, but we have to be able to maintain relationships with the public, with the community, and it's difficult to do that at a distance. Now, I will say that this utilization of Zoom really kind of helped us stay connected and at least know some of the things that are going on when we look at meeting with groups and other agencies that are out there to try to kind of manage partnerships and resources. But I would say relationships has been a challenge. And then finally, I think, especially as we talked about how we're opening up more so due to the relaxed requirements, is that it made me a little nervous when I thought people were looking to utilize law enforcement to enforce some of the regulations on this. And it's just not something I think we should be involved in unless, there's a peace violation. So, but I would say those were the biggest challenges, but we look forward to getting back to normal as well, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir Cohen?
Thank you, Ms. Booth. So we've all had to deal with COVID-19 in one way or another, but we thank each of you for your efforts in helping the community adjust. So thank you very much for that. Ms. Scott will now lead the discussion on the priorities, on your priorities in addressing racial inequalities. Ms. Scott.
Good evening. My question is in reference to racism. As you know, racism is an issue across the country. We have witnessed the impact of racial injustices in our community. As a leader, what policy or practices have you proposed to address racial disparities in your organization and community? Dr. Hawkins, can we start with you first?
Sure. Thank you very much. First of all, the Urban League is a civil rights and advocacy organization. And so we want to ensure that we can interrupt racism. And we believe that there's one way to do that, dismantling systemic policies and practices throughout our country, through our organizations, throughout our government systems. And those are things that we have to do in order to create change. And we're grateful to individuals that have partnered with us to do that. But I think that it's critical. There's a key to this, and the key is wealth building. That's how we're going to move out of this. One, we have to dismantle policies and practices that are racist, absolutely. But we have to create more opportunities, equitable opportunities for communities of color. And we believe at the Urban League, we do that through home ownership. In fact, we have a partnership right now with the city of Rochester to create more wealth, to create more home ownership with our lease to purchase program. So we believe that creating home ownership opportunities, entrepreneurship, by creating more business owners that can have more control over their wealth and create wealth is going to reduce the inequities that we see in our community. So our focus right now is home ownership and entrepreneurship. Of course, we support policies like the George Floyd Policing Act. We support Daniel's Law. We want to make sure that there are stronger mental health supports for our community members. We want to reimagine policing. And we also want to make sure that we do everything possible to interrupt racism.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. And home ownership is very important. It just goes to show that home ownership helps build a community. And we thank the city of Rochester for working with you. Chief Herriott-Sullivan, can you share your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. I think that hiring for us, we have to have a diverse staff in dealing with the public. I've been in this field for some years, and it's all the little things. I've been on patrol with all sorts of people, and there are little things about each of us that you really can't necessarily teach. So it's really important that we have people from different backgrounds who can relate to all types of people and cultures involved in this work. I think we should, and it should be standard practice, look at our policies and procedures, because they constantly need updating. Things change, technology changes, and we have to be able to keep up with that. We want to look at training and development. How do we bring our people along? What do we teach? We all know the challenges that law enforcement and policing in this city is dealing with. And while it's true, we have a lot of organizations that will mention law enforcement and reimagining, but the truth is we have to come together in one piece, which is what I love about this executive order. It gives us a chance to really talk about how that's going to happen. You know, it's just necessary that we have one body that can ensure that this moves forward in the best way possible. So, and when I say staffing, I don't just mean law enforcement, I mean civilians. I mean, it's across the board. There's a diverse level of work that needs to happen. There are different issues we're involved in that impacts the community services. And we need that perspective in order to do exactly what the community needs to do to ensure that their voice is at the table. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. You mentioned diversity, and we do have a very diverse community. So it's important that we do have diversity on our police force. Thank you. Mayor Warren, can you respond?
Thank you, Sora Scott. I think that for us in the city, and many people know the challenges that we are facing right now, not just with law enforcement, but across the board. But when it comes down to really dealing with racism, we have to be intentional about change and intentional about making sure that everyone participates in the economic recovery of our community. And so for me, it was time to introduce the ERA agenda, which really focuses on equity. Just this past week, we received the Race Commission's report. That commission was led by 3 dynamic people in our community, former Mayor Johnson, Dr. Shafiq. And, we were very excited about the report, but what it really pointed out was that there are laws and institutional barriers and things that government has done that continue to perpetuate the disparities that we see in our community. And we have to make a commitment to change those, and not just by dealing with our economics of it all, but really about dealing with not our police department, dealing with our housing and redlining and changing how redlining really affects communities of color, promoting and looking at how we provide sanctions in our Department of Human Services, providing support for mental health and mental health awareness, making sure that our businesses are really hiring people and paying them a living wage. And so when you look across the board at how we do business in our community, the fact is that racism has played an enormous role in holding Black and Brown people back. And it's time that we are intentional about changing it. And that is intentional about hiring, intentional about promoting, intentional about investing dollars into businesses. And all of those things are what we're talking about doing with the ERA agenda, and looking forward to working with our community partners to bring to fruition so that we can intentionally change the outcomes for Black and Brown people in our community.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you just define ERA?
It's the Equitable Recovery Agenda.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks. Okay, Dr. Harbin, can you provide feedback?
Yes, Jordan Health, we were with many in this community signing on that racism is a public health crisis. It has always been a public health crisis. Even when you look at years ago, at 16 going to college, and the drugs in Detroit was a criminal problem. And my professor telling us at that time in 1970, it's not until it involves the suburbs, will it become a health problem? And as we very well know, we have a public health crisis with drugs because it's just impacting people of color. We have town hall meetings to talk with our employees and our teammates because they have to be sensitive, culturally sensitive to the people that they're interacting with every day. They understand that it does make a difference, that the people that serve you look like you. You know, have made a lot of changes on our mid-level management and our senior leadership management, because it makes a difference that how come, you know, you could treat me, but nobody in power looks like me, you know. We're looking at the policies and working with the county, with the transition with the county, with the state, with different other organizations to say, you got to change the policies. The policies are designed to keep Black and brown people where they are. And until you change those policies, all the talking in the world is not going to make a difference.
Thank you, Dr. Harbin. You're right. Policy change has to happen in order for change to occur. Thank you. And Dr. Myers-Small, how are you addressing the issue at the Rochester City School District?
So certainly as an educational institution, we have a responsibility, right, to make sure that this is articulated both internally and externally. First and foremost, in the strategic plan, which I proposed to the Board of Education, racism, bias, and inclusion are a part of that framework, because the strategic plan guides everything that we do in the district. And so that's a key component within the plan. Second, we are participating in the development of anti-racist curriculum that will soon be taught in high schools across Monroe County. We know that Rochester has a rich history of social justice and advocacy and anti-racist efforts that go all the way back to Frederick Douglass. So we are making sure that it's embedded into the curriculum. We also wrote a letter multiple months ago to the College Board requesting that an advanced placement African and African American Studies course should be a part of the accelerated or academic curriculum for students. So we were involved with that, and that took off nationally and has gained ground. We also need to make sure that there's culturally responsive, trauma-informed care when dealing with the needs of our scholars, because they have been through a lot over the past year. We have a diversity plan that is continually being refined and modified. We have a group of community and school stakeholders that participate on the REAL team, which is the Racial Equity and Action Leadership team. I'm working with superintendents, about 6 from across the state, to make sure that we have supportive information for superintendents to lead racial initiatives and anti-racist, and then just really just calling the question in the varied spaces and tables that I sit in around the need for dealing with race.
Thank you, Dr. Myers-Small. And we appreciate all that you do for our students at the Rochester City School District. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So we are relieved to know that our leaders, you recognize there is a problem. And we're relieved to know that you are addressing the racial inequality and disparity issues in our community. And from what I heard, you're doing this through changing policy. You're doing this through educating, reimagining. You're doing this through staffing, making sure there's diversity, and you're being intentional about the change that you're trying to make. You're doing this also by teaching folk about home ownership and how to build wealth. And you're doing this by having conversations through town hall meetings. And you're also doing this by building this into your strategic plan to help guide those changes and implementing, or soon to be implementing, anti-racism curriculum. So thank you again so very much for making this a priority on your desk. So now we have some more specific questions for you. And these questions pertain specifically to your role and your position. And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Myers-Small, as our superintendent. We talked a little bit earlier about the COVID, and you mentioned how things had to adjust. And yes, we're in our hybrid model now. We've been here for about a month, I think it is. So can you tell us, in addition to what you've shared, what challenges have you had to address? For example, outside challenges like pushback from unions or pushback from parents and even from the community.
Yeah, so, again, going back to the life ain't been no crystal stair. But, I just have to start by saying my guiding compass, my moral compass is that I can go to bed every night if I feel like I've made the decisions in the best interest of children, right? And so that really is it for me. And so even though there is often a cacophony of, you should have done this, there's a lot of Monday morning quarterback that people do on behalf of my job. I'm still pushing forward. So major issues moving forward is that everyone has an opinion about, should we be reopened? Should we stay closed? If we reopen, how many days should we be open? And how that should happen. And so trying to balance that really has been very difficult, but we have relied very heavily on partnering with Dr. Mendoza, with the Department of Health. We've worked with Mayor Lesli Warren, with her office, we've partnered with the county. And so that really has been very, very helpful. As Mayor Warren noted, we continue to feed our scholars, even though they were remote. We continue to give them supports as far as, laptops and Chromebooks. I also shared earlier that I am so appreciative and grateful for how generous our community has been to our school community. I think the other thing that I think is huge and most people take for granted, our budget was not structurally balanced until the end of November, and that was under our leadership, right, to get us there. And so we have to make sure that we are fiscally solvent. And then really critically important, I have to, with my team, make sure that we are increasing the graduation rate and ensuring that each one of our scholars who graduate from Rochester are college, career, and civic ready. So we can continue to push forward, and we recognize that it takes all those who are on the screen with me and others to make sure that our scholars are successful and they have what they need to move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Myers-Small. So the main thing I pull from that is you were hearing opinions from all entities, but you feel like because you can sleep at night knowing that you're doing the best for the children and you're looking in the best interest of the children, and also relying on partnerships with the health and science community is kind of what helped led the decision to reopen schools with the hybrid model. Okay, so I'm glad that you were able to overcome those type of challenges. Will students receive any remediation in September? Before I move on to the next question.
So it really, students are starting to receive remediation now. We can't wait until September, and we're also looking at what we might be able to do to enhance what happens in the summer. But what I want to be really clear about is that we also have to remember that we're dealing with little ones, and they do need some time to play. They need some time to be just simply children. So we're working to balance the learning loss that we need to recoup, but also just allow them to be, to kind of enjoy summer as well.
Thank you very much. So my next question goes to you, Mayor Lesli Warren. Okay, so now there have been some recent events, particularly with law enforcement and with civilians, which resulted in significant social unrest in our community. What policies were instituted because of these events, and what is working well, and what adjustments are necessary to make them more effective?
Thank you for that question. And as you indicated, we have experienced a lot over the last year. And I'm thankful to Chief Cynthia Herriott-Sullivan for her leadership. Just a couple months ago, about a month ago, we released a draft Executive Order 203 plan, which really looks at how we police in the city of Rochester. This was a plan that was put together by people that have been focused on law enforcement, from Reverend Stewart and UCLM to the Race Commission. One of the members of the Race Commission, former Deputy Chief Wayne Harris, as well as the PAB and the police department. We also had members of City Council that sat on the team as well. This allowed us to really look at our policies and our procedures. We're working with a law firm out of Washington, D.C. that Wilmer Hell, that works directly with the Department of Justice under President Obama. And so when we look at policies and procedures, we're looking at mental health. How do we respond to mental health clause? It allowed us to actually develop a new mental health response team, a person in crisis team that's being led by Commissioner Danielle Lyman-Torres. They respond to people that are in crisis, and that allowed us to be able to do that. We are looking at how we actually hire officers and allowing the community to be a part of that process where they're not a part of that process right now, and making those recommendations, advocating for us to be able to actually fire an officer for cause. At this point in time, we cannot immediately fire an officer for cause, and we need to change the law to allow us to do that. Really advocating for changes in policies when it comes down to pepper spraying, a child to handcuffing, to how we deal with our children, and making sure that we work collectively as a community to protect our children, especially when they are engaging with law enforcement. And so there's a lot to be done. I would recommend that people go to www.cityofrochester.gov/executive order 203. Right now it is before City Council, and you can speak to them. They will be editing it. And they have a number of sessions that they will be doing for this particular executive order. But we are really changing the way we do business in the city of Rochester, and it's going to be hard work, but it is definitely necessary work for us to be able to protect the people and love the people that we serve.
Thank you, Mayor Warren. Just to clarify, so they can go to the City of Rochester's website and find a tab where they can give input or participate in a discussion about that executive order?
Yes, Executive Order 203, they should, right now, it is now been turned over to City Council, the final draft, and they have a number of different sessions that they are having on this particular executive order, but they could read it, look at the recommendations, and basically ask those recommendations to be enhanced or changed. Right now, we have to send that to Governor Cuomo by April 1st. And I believe that City Council will vote on it, I believe April 26th or 27th.
Okay, thank you for sharing that and clarifying. Chief Herriott-Sullivan, the next question is for you. White supremacists and other hate groups have infiltrated the police nationwide. If this issue is identified within the Rochester Police Department, how would you or the department address it?
Thank you. First, I just want to reiterate to the public that I have no information that there are any white supremacists that are members of the Rochester Police Department. But having said that, I work closely with the federal authorities on different matters. As a matter of fact, as chief, I have to have a security clearance so I can discuss sensitive matters. And so, for example, with the January 6th incident at the Capitol, they reiterated to me they had no information of any Rochester officer being involved in that activity or being a member of one of those groups. And if that were the case, they would certainly share that with me. So I thank them for, obviously keeping me in the loop on those sorts of matters. But I want to also say that when I came in, and something I stress and continue to stress for my people, that anybody I'm going to put in a leadership position, that I want competence, commitment, and ethical conduct from them. I mean, those things are critical. But I'm also a firm believer that if we do our jobs as leaders and we give out expectations for how we expect our staff to work with and treat the public, and we hold people accountable for that, I think that minimizes the need for being concerned about issues like this, because it's within our policy that you cannot, as a police officer, support hate groups. You just cannot do it. But between that and then holding people accountable in their work and how they deal with the public in a fair and graceful manner, I think we're well on our way to addressing any concerns that might come up. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm pretty sure the community is relieved again to know that you're working with those other agencies to inform you if there are some those type of individuals that exist in our department. So I, for one, am very happy to know that you are on top of that. Thank you very much. Dr. Hawkins? The Urban League launched the Interrupt Racism campaign last summer amidst the social unrest in our country. Tell us how this model came about and what do you hope to accomplish?
Thank you. First of all, we launched Interrupt Racism first as a platform designed to employ collective impact. And when I think about collective impact and I listen to my co-panelists here, I think about the collective impact that we are making together to create a more equitable Rochester. And I just want to say I thank you all for the work that you're doing, and I'm constantly in awe of what you do for the greater Rochester community. So the Interrupt Racism platform, it just began as really a community-wide suggestion box designed to hear and uplift the voices of individuals who didn't have a seat at the table. And what we wanted to do is take those suggestions and create a process for healing, but also create a report to the community, which we released to the community in January. But then Interrupt Racism actually evolved into really the Urban League's vision for a more equitable Rochester. And we created an equity and advocacy division. And then we did our work through the Interrupt Racism Summit, which we launched this past October. And that was an opportunity to help the community understand what equity means and what the needs are, and identify the work that needs to be done to dismantle racism here in Rochester, and particularly to thinking about the double pandemic of racism and COVID-19 crisis. We also wanted to develop a common language for individuals and create actionable solutions to dismantling racism in Rochester. And we also wanted to make sure that we raised awareness about what discourse needed to happen, what practices, and who needed to be accountable for these changes of interrupting racist practices. And then in November, our work just grew. In November, we became the new stewards of REGI, the Racial Equity and Justice Initiative, previously led by St. Joseph's Neighborhood Center, now which is Interrupt Racism. And in April, we'll be beginning to help organizations really do their work within their organizations to dismantle systemic racism, systemic policies and practices, and remove the barriers to becoming a more equitable and inclusive organization. And then this fall, we'll host our Interrupt Racism Summit again, creating a space for our community to continue to do its work. But we're also going to invite Buffalo to be part of that and participate. So our work is expanding. Last year at our summit, we had over 500 people attend from all across the country. And so it really is demonstrative of the need to interrupt racism and that the community wants to do their work.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. So you mentioned in April is when you're going to connect with other organizations to go in and help them dismantle systemic racism. Is that going to be in the form of just a roundtable discussion, workshop, training? What would that look like?
So thank you for asking that question, because it will be in the form of a cohort. And so in previous iterations of Reggie, there were cohort members, organizations, even the city participated, many organizations participated in doing their work together as a cohort. So we're opening that up. If organizations are interested, they can apply on our website online. But we will work with our team and we will help you do that. And you'll do that collectively with your peers. We'll also have a CEO group. We actually did some work with CGR to understand what were the needs as we enriched Reggie. And so, and to create it to this interrupt racism. So we took that learning and we created this opportunity for organizations to really get involved, but there's also a CEO track and focus.
Thank you very much for sharing that and clarifying. Dr. Harbin, I have a question for you as well. How is the number of vaccines Jordan Health Center receives determined? And is this formula or is the process comparable to other health centers? And last part of that is, how do individuals register for the vaccination with you?
Well, there is not a formula. I think some of you are aware that last week, Senator Schumer announced that Jordan Health was selected as one of the 250 federal qualified health centers across the country that will receive vaccines directly from the federal government. Up until that point, we received, and we still hope to receive from the state. At times we call the county and say, we haven't heard anything from the state. Can you guys give us some vaccines so that so it's not as if you can just say, I need 1,000 doses and you're going to get 1,000 doses, because they're trying to distribute it. As far as the federal qualified health centers, it's been pretty consistent. We know that for the next 3 weeks, we'll get 200 doses directly from the federal government. Our push has been with the state, do not stop giving us whatever doses you were giving us before. We have explained to the state, and I think other federal clinics have explained to the state, our patients cannot get on these complicated call in, register. You got to be on the computer all day and try to navigate that. We have navigators, so we are reaching out directly to our patients. We are partnering, like most recently, with school number 22, and thank you, Dr. Meyer Small, for allowing school 22 to really jump in. We have probably about 800 doses now through partnering with school number 22. So it is really, you really don't know from week to week. We had a time that 400 doses just showed up. At that point, we have to take our staff that normally should be seeing primary care and schedule a Saturday event or schedule time during the afternoon and evenings, trying to get those doses in, because we have 7 days from the time you get it. You have to have it in the arms in 7 days, or you lose the right to even request doses.
Could I just add something really quickly? I just want to say thank you, because we know that there's a lot of fear and trepidation, particularly in Black and Brown communities, around even the doses. So when we can bring that right in our own communities with individuals who look like the community that they serve, it makes all the difference in the world. So we were really grateful to have that partnership and to be able to offer that opportunity to some of our school community.
Thank you. And the community was very grateful. Our seniors came in, they could have hugged us, they would have hugged us, because they was just thanking and doing air high fives. A great event, and just a personal thank you to Dr. Clinton Bell, the principal, that said, you want to do it, we're going to make it happen. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harbin, for sharing that. Really appreciate that. Okay, so now we're going to open it up for our audience, the community, to ask questions. And we're taking questions right from the Facebook chat. So if you have a question, just type it right into the chat. And so Ms. McClaney is going to look at your questions. She'll be asking them shortly. She'll be leading the Q&A. I also want to reiterate that the feedback form link that I mentioned early on can be found in that Facebook chat. We really would like your feedback. So we ask that you also take a moment to click on that link and fill it out, because again, we want to hear from you about our community conversations. Okay, Ms. McClaney, do we have any questions? So
Yes, we do.
beautiful.
We have some questions for our panelists. If you can just jump in and just respond, add on. I'm going to take some questions off of our Facebook. And I have one that says, as a female leader in our community, in what way are you able to leverage resources to support mental health in our community? Anyone?
So as I shared, that really has been critical for us in the Rochester City School District. If you think about it, our scholars really have experienced a triple trauma threat. They have the trauma of ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. They have the trauma of COVID-19. And then they also have the trauma of just all the social unrest and unrest that has happened in our community. So I have to tell you that, again, the generous and philanthropic nature of our community has been very overwhelming in a good way. But we have really had direct conversations with different entities who have provided that hands-on contact support, or we've had to deliver that support virtually. So that is really beyond making sure that my scholars are educated and that they meet or exceed standards. Those mental health supports are critical. Dr. Michael Mendoza said to me that when the Rochester City School District begins to open up, we have to be extremely cognizant of the trauma that is going to come across the threshold. And so we really have placed a significant a significant emphasis on making sure that mental health supports are in place. But what's critically important as we talk about race is that they have to be culturally responsive as well to ensure that it's really meeting the needs of our young people.
Yes, I just want to add to that. I remember, my goodness, it's been many, many years now, meeting with Mayor Lesli, and she raised the issue when it came to Jordan. What can you guys do about mental health and behavioral health? There's a need in this community. There continues to be a need in this community, both in having the workforce to address mental health and having the finances to actually help support it. So we're attempting to do partnerships. We have a behavioral health program, constantly trying to find clinicians of color so that they are can be responsive and relate to the patients that we serve. But that continues to be a struggle and an issue for us at Jordan Health, and I believe for the Rochester community. We need a recruitment plan and some dollars thrown at it to bring people in and be able to keep them here.
I just want to echo and to thank Dr. Harbin for her leadership and for Jordan's leadership on this very topic of mental health. People are experiencing a lot of trauma, as Dr. Myers-Small has just mentioned, not just our children, but parents and many of our families, our seniors as well, because of the pandemic, being alone in their home, not having that connection with family members. The chief these last months have been really tough on our community because we're seeing people just really cry out for help. And I must commend our Department of Recreation and Human Services, Dr. Danielle Lyman Torres and her team, Dr. Aaliyah Hinton, who's leading the Person in Crisis team, for stepping up and really building the plane while it's flying and responding to calls and not necessarily knowing what's coming through the system or 911, our 911 team. And so for us, it's really about building those partnerships and working collectively, not only to hire, but to get the right people on the job to be able to respond to the needs of our residents, because many of them are hurting and they're crying out and they need that support. Without Jordan Health Center, we're partnering with the University of Rochester and Rochester Regional Health and really coming together as a community. One of the recommendations from the Race Commission is exactly what Dr. Harbin was talking about, making sure that there are dollars available to really look at recruitment and building that pipeline for behavioral health professionals to be able to respond to the needs of the residents in our community, because many people are suffering because of isolation, because of job loss, and because of hopelessness. And we are asking our faith community really to step up and to help us with this as well, because we need them to come outside the four walls of the church and really reach out to the people that live in the community from what we're seeing. And I'm asking this community to please continue to keep the young baby, the 1-year-old whose father committed suicide and jumped off of the South Avenue garage in your prayers. They weren't originally from Rochester, but came here. He's at the Golisano Children's Hospital. Pray for those people that are attending to him. And then we just, Dr. Myers-Small just mentioned, and the chief, we just lost another child to a car accident in our community. So there's a lot going on, and we need to lift each other up and to embrace each other during this challenging time. But we're working collectively together in partnership to really build that support that is needed across the board to be that support and that help to our residents.
I just wanted to lift up something else as well, because when we think about the individuals that help those that are dealing with the traumas of racism, the traumas of COVID-19 crisis, the trauma of facing eviction, the trauma of food insecurity, the essential workers, they vicariously deal with that trauma. And so we have to make sure that we have strong mental health supports for those individuals as well. And especially when you're providing a lot of resources for folks and you're taking that on. And so I wanted to just lift how important that was. And that was something that we've been focusing on at the Urban League, encouraging our team to get resources and finding our partners to make sure that our team can get mental health supports, because they're dealing with those same traumas.
Thank you. I have a question. I want to try to combine these two questions, very similar to what you were just responding to. And the question is there any way we can implement more counseling for our students who are struggling with drug addictions or overindulging in recreation drugs? And then also just keeping in mind the support that we need for our students, our children in the community as it relates to crime as well.
So that continues to be a focus of the Rochester City School District. And again, getting reacclimated to working in an urban school district, there are many unique needs that exist. And certainly the drug addiction, we had a scholar unfortunately involved with the Rochester resident who was set on fire, right? There is so much baggage, and the life experiences of our young people are so difficult. I'm grateful that they show up every day, right? And they're ready to learn. But if we don't start really being more proactive as far as addressing some of these issues. And it can't just happen between 8 and 3 during the school day. We really need to have those supports before and after school. And some of our scholars really need some extensive supports and counseling. So I am always open to partner and to work with anyone who's going to be able to help us deliver those particular supports. But some of our young people have had experiences that we have no touch points with whatsoever. We don't have any, understanding about what they're going through. And so what I would ask as well is that when you see a young person out, whether it's Rochester or Brockport or Brighton or wherever, it's so easy to snarl and say, look, they're up to no good. They're wearing baggy pants, or they're cursing. Try and be compassionate and just not take that deficit-based thinking, and just say a kind word to them and just encourage them.
I was gonna say at Jordan, we are beginning to partner with Sarah Taylor. She has a support group for parents dealing with children with mental health, and a support system. And so we're looking at bringing that support internal into our centers, so that the parents who's dealing with children have some type of support. With the Black Indigenous People of Color is the name of the group that she has been working with and created. But again, trying to bring resources internally, so that when we look at health as total health, everything that impacts that. So naturally, mental health is a huge part of that. How do we bring the resources so it's almost a one-stop shop? When you come in, you have support of all the different needs that you need to have, because we know our parents is dealing with enough. They're trying to survive, and if it's stressing us out, and we have decent jobs and it's stressful, but hey, we're able to pay those bills. We can imagine what other people are dealing with on the top of this pandemic. How do we bring more resources to help support them?
Thank you very much. At this time, just for time's sake, I'm going to refer back to Dr. Cohen. Thank you, ladies, for responding to the community questions.
Thank you, Ms. McClaney, and thank you to everyone who submitted a question, and for our panelists for their willingness to answer it. At this time, I'm going to ask if there was anything that you wanted to share that we didn't get a chance, or you didn't get an opportunity to share. I know Chief Herriott-Sullivan wanted to come back to her comment she made earlier on, presumed incompetence. So here's an opportunity in about a minute or so to expound on that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cohen. Something I've noted, and it's come up in different groups. Like I would volunteer a lot, I'd serve on boards to try to help nonprofits with the talents that I do have. And we got into a conversation, and in this instance, it was for the Women's Foundation. So it was a board of women around the table. And we were trying to have a discussion about what it was. And I had brought up the term, the presumed incompetence. And it just lit a fire with us. And we started having a big discussion on it. And that you walk in the door as a woman often with a deficit, that there's a presumption that your skill level is only so high. But then with men, it's presumed to be much higher, and it's theirs to lose. But we walk in having to gain it, and it's constant. And so when we talk about, the stress of living for people of color, but also as women, that's an added adage to the table for us. That's extra stress that we know walking in the door. It's something we have to manage and be conscious of. So a short story I wanted to share. We were watching the story on the March Madness and the comments about the women athletes having much poorer gym equipment. And so my daughter went through school and they played AAU, and I would be pointing out to my husband, see the difference? We'd go in for when the women would have to play, and I'd look around, and he started to notice. And that was years ago, but we're still having this discussion. And so it's just amazing to me that it's something we have to stay vigilant about, that presumption is there in so many ways. But if you come in prepared, which is what I raised my daughter to do and the young women I know, you come in prepared for it, then you've got a strategy that you're planning on. So if I leave you with nothing else, it's to have your toolbox ready, because you will have to deal with it. But thanks again for having me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief Sullivan, Herriott-Sullivan. Anybody else?
Dr. Cohen, I just wanted to uplift the fact that there is often a stereotype or even a myth that African-American women are, spiteful and extremely competitive with one another and don't support one another. I can say unequivocally with the women, certainly on this panel, but also women that I'm seeing on the screen, I can pick up the phone. I remember I've never had a political cartoon drawn of me, and I had a horrible one in the fall. I sent it to the mayor. I said, this is what happened today. And, she gave me some feedback. She said, you know what? It's a shame what they do to African-American women, but I felt comfortable being able to share that with her. I had a very just really transparent conversation with the chief, and we were laughing. And, I am so grateful that I have women in leadership roles, right, who look like me, who understand my experiences and what I go through, my frustrations, and certainly some of the joys, that I can be very transparent. And, I call it, I can do the verbal throw up, right? So I can just spew it all out and say, this is what's going on with me today. And they get it. I don't have to define it. I don't have to go down a rabbit hole. They get it when you say just a few things. So I am so incredibly grateful for Chief, for the mayor, for Dr. Harbin and Dr. Hawkins, who are great thought partners. And really, the power is so incredible of what the impact that we really can have on the great city of Rochester.
Thank you, Dr. Myers-Small. That was really beautiful. And I noticed that too throughout this conversation tonight. I'm thinking to myself, wow, there is such camaraderie between these ladies, and it's very noticeable. And I'm sure the community noticed it as well. So I thank you for just kind of bringing that out and bringing our attention to that. Thank you so very much. Well, ladies, we're going to move forward. Again, I want to thank you very much for your willingness to participate in this. I'm sure the community is appreciative as well. At this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Donna Harris, who will now share some key takeaways from this community conversation. Dr. Harris.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen. And again, thank you, panelists. This was just amazing conversation and dialogue. You are truly change makers within the community. And I'm so glad that others will be able to understand how dynamic you are and how you're investing in the community. And despite confronting racism, sexism, ageism, you have used your community connections, your mentors, to dismantling the stereotypes that you confront about your competence. You have prepared yourself with a strategy. And as Chief Herriott-Sullivan said, you have your multiple toolbox that you are using to address multiple levels of issues within the community, from racism to COVID-19 to economic distress to mental distress. You are committed to the community, engaging in your partnerships to address the complexity of the day-to-day lives of citizens in Rochester. You recognize and call out racism within the spaces and places that you operate, you're working to address structural racism within organizations, and recognizing that we need to have staff within organizations that look like our community. And so we need them at all levels of the organization, and they need to be paid well. They need to have opportunities for advancement. In addition, there's a general need to invest in our community. The issue of collective impact that Dr. Hawkins brought up is very important because people can do lots of different things. I think what we are seeing through your example is that you're working in tandem, and that's really important. If we're really going to see change, we need to hold up your examples to partner and understand what the community needs and provide the resources to do that. One challenge I give to those who are watching, that we also must take action in making change. And two key things that I'm asking us to do is to go to the city's website and to review the Executive Order 203 and provide feedback to City Council. You can contact your specific City Council or any other City Council members to provide your comments before the City Council meeting on the third Tuesday in April. Also, I encourage people to read the Race Commission report. So we hope that this event provides information to help you stay engaged regarding the issues presented today. We encourage you to reach out to the panelists, attend community forums and events, including City Council meetings, school board meetings, and to support organizations such as Jordan Health and the Urban League of Rochester. Special thanks again to our dynamic panel, Mayor Lesli Warren, Chief Sullivan, Herriott-Sullivan, Dr. Janice Harbin, Dr. Lesli Myers-Small, and Dr. Seanelle Hawkins for your participation at this event. We must recognize this historic moment as that is represented by our panelists, that you've broken structural barriers as being the first woman or the first Black woman to hold your leadership role. You represent a collective of Black women leaders across the nation who are addressing some of the most pressing issues of our generation and in the new millennium. We raise you up as examples of Black womanhood and as role models for our daughters, granddaughters, sisters, nieces, cousins, mentees, mothers. And you also stand on the shoulders of Harriet Tubman, Shirley Chisholm, Dorothy I. Height, Constance Baker Motley, Barbara Jordan, and many others, including our own chapter soror, Ruth Scott, who was the first African-American woman to win a seat on City Council. So thank you so much. Soror Cohen.
Thank you very much. That was beautiful, Dr. Harris. That was beautiful. Oh my goodness. We appreciate you providing us with those key points and giving us some nuggets to take home with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our Delta Talks community conversation on Rochester's Powerbrokers, Women and Policy. Thank you for joining us this evening. If you have not completed the feedback form, please do so now. We will like your feedback. Again, the link can be found in the Facebook chat. And if you'd like to reach out to the organizations that are represented here tonight, please view the slide that's coming up for their contact information. Also, you can view this Delta Talk broadcast again by visiting the Rochester Alumnae Chapter Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated Facebook page. So on behalf of the Social Action Committee, I'd like to say thank you and have a good night. Thank you.